Hey everybody, welcome back to the 90s First Take. I'm finally back again, and I couldn't be happier to have our awesome guest, Chris Clow, who we're going to talk about in just a minute. But first, Patreon. You guys, we have updated our Patreon for support only. Right now, everything that you get from us, we just wanted to get it out to you. So if you like what you hear and you want to support us, Patreon, as little as $1 or as much as you want per month. And if you like what you're hearing, if you want to support us in any way financially, go ahead, jump on our Patreon, look at what we offer, and feel free to jump in at any amount. Now, that out of the way, Chris, we are super stoked to have you with us. Tell us about yourself. Who are you? Where can we find you?
Well, thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate it. And it's nice to sort of be back in the mix since the last show I was on was with my Discovery Debrief co-host Cicero Holmes, and we got to talk about Star Trek on 90s First. And that was a lot of fun. We had a great time.
My mind was blown during that episode.
Well, Star Trek does that. You know, it's one of the reasons I like it so much.
I don't know. I think you and Cicero did that for me. Don't sell yourself short.
Well, much appreciated. But I mean, either way, I am. God, you put me on the spot. I don't really know how to adequately describe. I mean, by day, I'm a business-to-business journalist, and at every other time of the day, I'm someone who really likes to write and to talk about the things that I love. And the things that I love are comics, video games, certain like TV shows and properties. And in a past life, I was able to serve as an entertainment reporter for Fandango and Movies.com, where I got to talk primarily about comics-based media. That's something that took me to the set of The Dark Knight Rises in 2011 while it was shooting in Pittsburgh. I got to.
All right.
It was a lot of fun. I got to watch Bane blow up a football field from the press box at Heinz Field, and that was, since Batman is one of my top 3 all-time favorite characters in fiction. It was quite an opportunity.
Gotta be a bucket list item, just like.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because when you go to those kinds of set visits, you're there with, I don't know, a dozen other people from a bunch of other different online outlets. And understandably, that they don't come from it, or they don't come to it from the same place that I do, in the sense that at that same time I was also working as a retailer at a comic book store. So, I mean, comics have been kind of intertwined in virtually all of the pursuits that I've tried to apply myself to. And it's really because of my fandom in comics that I even became a professional writer and later a journalist. But going to that set and working at the time as a comics retailer, when you have the chance to sit across from Christian Bale, everybody else is going to ask questions like, oh, what's it like on the set? And do you enjoy working with Tom Hardy? I'm going to ask him about Batman. And that's what I did. And it was, he gave, I asked him about, by the time the third movie rolls around, is he still as committed to the mission that forged him? The trauma that he endured as a child, is that still a part of him by this point? And he gave a really well thought out answer in terms of, it's not something that ever goes away. It's something that is always with him, even in the midst of all of these other things that are happening to him. He is still that child, basically. And I was just sitting there, and I could not have written a better response for him myself. Like, it's really cool when you get the sense that someone who's charged with embodying this character that so many millions of people admire so much, he gave an answer that is totally evocative of everything that Batman is supposed to be, especially in that world. So, but I only got to do that one time, unfortunately. It wasn't something I got to do again, which bums me out, but at the same time, the fact that I got to do it is it's still a pinch me moment. And I still have the Gotham Rogues jersey that they gave me on the set that day in the plastic bag that they gave.
That is amazing.
Is that framed above your bed, like your wife?
Not yet, but it might be. I'm in the process of a move right now, so by the time I get to the next place, I might have to put it in a frame. But
and right above your bed is the first thing your wife sees
right,
as she
yeah.
walks in.
I mean, yeah, if you're married, maybe not the best idea if
No.
you enjoy sharing a bedroom with your wife. But
She might be into it. It could go either way, you know. but the point is well
for
taken.
sure
But
it's 50-50.
But I mean, other than that, you know, I did that for a number of years. I've written for several different websites, and I've done things like movie, video game, and comic book reviews. Gaming is sort of a secondary element to the things that I've written about, and I've gotten to review a number of games professionally, and that's something that I greatly enjoy.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
And on top of that, podcasting is a natural extension of everything else that I've done. So I started doing podcasting really for DC Comics fandom 12 years ago now, 2008, 2009. And that kind of parlayed itself into being a part of a couple of other shows, and now I have a few of my own. I've got the Discovery Debrief Star Trek show with my buddy Cicero. I've got a comic book reading podcast called The Comic Binge with my very good and close personal friend Paul Herman, who is a huge comics fan in his own right. And I also have a show called Comics on Consoles where I dive into comics-based video games, the good and the bad.
And both.
All right, so
exactly.
What is your professional opinion on Superman 64?
It's hard for me to say much more beyond laughing. No, I mean the last episode of the last like fully featured episode of Comics on Consoles that I did was actually on the year 2000 Spider-Man game. And the reason that I bring that up is because really that game exemplified what a 3D superhero game can be. It's still 20 years later eminently playable. It's still fun. It gets the story pitch perfect. It's kind of like an extended episode of the animated show from the early 90s or the mid 90s. And that's one of the things that I love so much about it. Superman came out a few years before Spider-Man 2000 did, and it was really while superhero video games were still trying to find their foot in 3D. That being said, it doesn't really justify how much of a misfire that game was. A lot of that I lay at the feet of the developers.
I think your misfire word there is maybe nicer than it should be.
Well, yeah, clearly. I mean, I actually tried playing it again a couple years ago when I was in a retro game store out here in Chicago. I came upon the strategy guide, and I was flipping through it, and it's kind of funny trying to read it because the guy who wrote it, he's very clearly like, if you manage to get past this part, then and it's just like you can almost read between the lines, and it's a fascinating artifact, I'll put it that way. So Superman 64 is absolutely deserving of its reputation, but it was also kind of an important building block for what would come later, I would think.
So we'll substitute miss and instead input dumpster, and we'll keep fire.
There you go. That's fair.
Dumpster fire. Yep.
We'll just do a quick edit on that.
There you go.
So one more time, what was the comic binge?
Comics on Consoles
and
is
that's the Superman one. What was the one before that? Comic binge?
Oh yeah, the Comic Binge, and it's on Twitter at Binge Comic. Paul came up with that. He loves that username, and it's kind of fun to say.
Username, yeah.
Yeah,
For
and then
who loves comics.
Then Discovery Debrief at DSC Debrief on Twitter. And my own personal website is just bychrisclow.com. It's my byline. And nice. I have a whole archive of video game reviews that I've written there, and the occasional blog post about things like DC is making a lot of different moves with its movies right now by bringing Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck back as Batman in the same movie.
I'm very excited about that.
An inspired choice, and
I'm just learning about it, and I like it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Things happening behind me.
Yeah.
Yo, Chris. So we like to do a little throwback in into the 90s for questions about you.
Okay.
And we call this our Guts segment. So just like Nickelodeon back in the day, we have the 90s first Guts. And if you are so willing to answer some personal questions, we would love to know some more about you.
Absolutely.
Mike, you wanna
Fire away.
take the first one?
Yes. So my game or my choice for the guts section on First Take is always, what is your favorite video game of all time? Not the best. What is your favorite video game of all time?
Oh, man. Maybe this seems like a cop-out. I don't know. It's kind of a three-way tie, honestly.
It's a cop-out.
You want me to... Yeah, all right. If you're going to force me to choose between them... Red Dead Redemption.
The first one?
The first one.
Okay.
The second one is spectacular, but I can't ignore the initial experience that the first one gave me the first time I played it. So even though, speaking objectively, the second one might be... I mean, the second one is obviously more ambitious, and it has a lot of really sort of fascinating modern sensibilities that just make it quote-unquote better by default because it's more capable and it's on more capable hardware.
Yeah,
but everything that first one did to sort of set the table for the things that the second one would do, I have to bow to the greatness of. So I'll probably say Red Dead.
I
laid the perfect
I
foundation.
love Red Dead Redemption. Could not get through Red Dead Redemption 2. It was just too much of a life simulator for me. I just
Oh man, that's too bad because that I was so, like, before it came out, I was so against the prospect of anyone other than John Marston being the main character. It's like, I love John. Are you going to take John away from me as the main playable character?
Yeah.
And I was not prepared for the amount of investment that I had in Arthur Morgan by the time the story ended.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt its story prowess. I just it just didn't feel like a game to me, and that's just my experience with gaming. It's just
I understand.
the fact that you can't run in your own campground just kind of made me like, I'm gonna play this.
Some people have reasonable critiques of Rockstar's game design being a little bit old school by modern standards, and I totally understand and empathize with that.
All right, Jelly, you got
All
a
right.
question for him?
I sure do. So, going off of that, if you had to choose a video game world to move to, which is perfect because you're moving already, where would you go? Which video game world do you move into?
That I would actually want to live in.
Yeah, not just visit. This is a permanent move into where you'll be raising a family.
It's certainly not New Austin or West Elizabeth in Red Dead. I would not want to live there.
Are you sure? You don't want diphtheria or
Cholera or no. I'll sidestep that. And it's also not Arkham City. I certainly wouldn't want to live there.
No.
So the Oregon Trail is what you're saying.
Administer laudanum. He's sick.
Timmy fell off the wagon and broke his leg.
Maybe the Mushroom Kingdom. It's. I feel like I could probably handle the stray Goomba that comes across. The weather always seems generally nice in the early worlds.
Yeah.
You can eat a mushroom and grow. It might be a nice place. I'm actually really looking forward to going to Super Nintendo World whenever the world gets back into normal grooves. But I probably wouldn't mind living in the Mushroom Kingdom. It seems like a very happy place, all things considered.
I think that's a very smart choice, just because you got a guy who can jump on the enemies. I think you could jump. Can you jump high enough?
Yeah.
I think you'd be fine.
I mean, look, you need a plumber. There's one there. You're good.
There's two. And there's the Mario Bros.
Yeah. That's true. Plenty of toads around to help.
Yeah,
You're
just
good.
chilling. I think that's a great choice.
It wasn't what I was expecting, but yeah, I agree. That's a fantastic choice. If you had to choose a world, that's a pretty safe world.
Yeah.
I mean, you could fall down a hole. There's several of them.
No,
but as long as you're watching out.
No, you don't fall down holes. You levitate down them. It's just
Yeah,
the
but
magic.
also, only one person ever gets kidnapped, and it's not me. So be safe.
No, I'm down. And usually you find gold, down in those.
Yeah.
So
Very
you could
true.
be wealthy.
Yeah.
Insurmountable wealth and nice weather.
Like it.
All right, let's jump forward. Sticking with the video game topics, obviously, because it is the 90s first take. What games have we been playing lately? For me personally, I'm an Apex junkie, and that's basically all I play, but I have been playing a little bit of Magic the Gathering, and I just downloaded Spellbreak, so hopefully Mike and I can play some of that eventually.
Yes.
But what have you guys been playing?
That's just an easy transition. I've been playing Spellbreak as well, just getting into just a different style of battle royale. Not a first person one, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. I haven't gotten a win yet, but it's something that I do want to kind of dig my teeth into a little bit more. There's a lot of things to learn, especially with how each of the elements actually works together. So like you could do fire, and then somebody on your team can have wind, and they could throw a tornado onto your fire, and it's basically a fire tornado. So just like there's so many nuances to the game with the elements. It's just pretty remarkable. And so just finding the different strategies, I think it's a very interesting and deep battle royale that I just didn't know that I would get into something like this, that not a first person shooter, but it is super fun. Do definitely want to continue playing that. And I have been also playing a trip down nostalgia lane, Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Man, this, Chris, I don't know if you grabbed it. An incredible deal, by the way, $40 for 2 remastered games. I will take that to my grave. But man, it is some of the most just like, Chris, you're a Star Wars fan. So when I saw Force Awakens, yeah, it was the same story as A New Hope, but it was just like a warm blanket that wrapped you around. Like, that movie was super Star Wars. It was so good. Just watching that, it just brought you back to the memories. That's what Tony Hawk does every single time I boot it up. It's like I get back down to the 99 when it came out, and the early 2000s when I was playing it all the time, and just like listening to the themes. The soundtrack is phenomenal, and plus the Vicarious Visions just remade something special. Like, everything feels the same. Are amazing. They added more challenges and just like kind of upped it to what's kind of like video game standards nowadays. They added that to just what's a super arcadey and fun time. Like, I just can't stop playing it, really. So those are the 2 games I've been playing. Chris, what about you?
Quick fun fact about that: the 2000 Spider-Man game that we've already talked about, developed by Neversoft, who made the first 2 Tony Hawk games, and it has the same engine as the Tony Hawk games.
And Spider-Man was in Tony Hawk 2 that came out.
He was an unlockable character. Yeah, there's a lot of lineage there.
Yes.
So I have a lot of respect for Neversoft. I haven't played the remasters yet, but I do plan to.
Dude, get
as
them.
far
It's
as
so good.
I mean, I will at some point. It's not a matter of if. It's a matter of when. In terms of what I've been playing recently, I actually I got back into Halo in a pretty big way.
There you go.
Over the last 5 or 6 months. Yeah, so I mean, I beat every mainline series game in its original form on Legendary, and then I did it again with the Master Chief Collection, and since Reach and
Humble brag.
Halo.
All right, I like it.
Well, I mean, I'm not. I don't think I'm being humble about it. I like playing it. It was fun. It was fun to do. I mean, I'm not saying it was easy or I blew through it.
You can brag about
or anything
that.
like that.
I have not done that, so please brag away.
Well,
Well, so
I've not been able to
I've
beat it on Legendary. Nope, not happening.
I beat Halo 3 ODST and Halo Reach on Legendary when they were added into the Master Chief Collection, and had already beaten the other games. So I've effectively gone through the series twice on Legendary. But it occurred to me that there are a couple of Halo games that I have not played nor beaten on Legendary, and those were the Halo Wars games. So I went back to Halo Wars 1 and played through it on Legendary. I thought I was going to pull my hair out when I was doing it. But especially like by the fourth mission, that was probably the hardest of the entire game, even considering the ramping up of enemies, and you got to fight scarabs, and you have to... one of the things I love about Halo Wars 1 is that once you actually upgrade your standard Marines all the way, they actually turn into ODSTs. And with your leader power, you can just drop ODST pods wherever you want, as long as you have the resources to just drop them in. Ooh. So taking over bases, I would send a bunch of vehicles over to like a Covenant base or something. And then as they were getting ready to go down, while they were focusing fire on certain enemies, I would just drop ODSTs repeatedly behind where they were looking and try to pound the crap out of everything.
There you go.
So Halo Wars 1 is a lot of fun. And then I started Halo Wars 2, also fun, but very different. Different developer. And overall, I think the thing that inspired me to do it was just that the Banished, which was a faction introduced in Halo Wars 2, are going to be the primary bad guys in Halo Infinite. So I wanted to know what the deal was with the Banished.
Yeah.
But while I was playing Halo Wars 2, a little game called The Avengers came out. And most of my time, right? Yeah, most of my time over the last week has been playing Avengers. Especially once I got to unlock my favorite Avenger, Captain America, it became a lot more interesting for me.
And who I heard is one of the better move sets and just like more fun to play. I've heard.
I think so. I mean, I'm biased, obviously, but Cap was the one I was looking forward to playing as the most. But he's sidelined for the majority of the campaign, so you don't play. You play as everybody else for most of the time.
Yeah.
So I was already looking forward to getting him. But then when I actually did get a hold of him and started playing as him more on a regular basis, it did feel stronger. Like Hulk has a weirdly low sprinting speed, which I guess is understandable for balance purposes. But playing as Cap, even though he's not a flyer, you don't feel hamstrung by that. Like he can still get around. He's got Titanfall wall running, which no one else has.
That's cool.
So he has a couple of other additional advantages. I love throwing the shield, and as it's on its way back to you, kicking it back into the enemy for another hit with higher damage output.
I saw that clip you posted on Twitter. It was pretty cool.
That's a blast, yeah. That said, I mean, there are certainly some technical deficiencies that the game has to overcome, but overall, I'm having a good time with it.
All right. Nice. Quick one last thing on video games. Neversoft. Mike, you'll probably know this. Do they still have the eyeball thing as part of it? Are they still around one? And then two, do they still have that eyeball animation?
They were absorbed into the rest of Activision.
Yeah, Neversoft is not really around anymore. I would assume that a lot of them went to like Vicarious Visions or like Toys for Bob, something that probably reused, not reused. That sounds bad about people.
They reused people.
They probably
spent up and done.
Yeah, pretty much. The component of the research that I put into the Spider-Man episode of Comics on Consoles I did was that I looked into what technically happened to the organization of Neversoft, and it sounds like Neversoft was actually merged into Infinity Ward. I don't know how many of the staff members from like the Tony Hawk and Spider-Man era were still around by that point.
Yeah, true.
But Neversoft still kind of exists, but inside Infinity Ward.
As
so they're
a
mostly
subsidiary of Infinity Ward. Neat. All right. Well, cool. Guys, let's hammer through this news stuff and then get to the fun stuff. So news. Mario 3D All-Stars is sold out on Amazon. You can't buy it. That's insane.
Yeah.
I didn't realize Mario was so popular because I'm not a huge Mario fanboy, but like, holy cow.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect anything less with the physical edition, to be honest. Like I would just expect it to sell like hotcakes, to be honest. And I heard he's never going to listen to this, but shout out to Justin Davis from IGN. But
We're going to send it directly to his email.
Yes. I heard him say a really good really good take on why this is selling out super quickly, and that's because getting an original copy of Super Mario Sunshine alone for the GameCube is like $80 to $100.
That's gross.
Just to get like to the GameCube version. And on top of that, if you don't have a GameCube or a Wii to play that GameCube game, you have to get one of those. So like, of course, people are going to buy a copy of Sunshine, and you get Galaxy and 64 in the same bundle. I think it's a no-brainer. And just plus Nintendo can just sell you things like 18 times in a row, and they don't care. So I mean,
I'm sure they care. They love it.
No,
because you'll just keep buying
yeah,
it.
well, yeah, true. But yeah, I'm not necessarily surprised, but I'm kind of ecstatic about it, because I want to champion this game. I think it's so cool that they announced it and it's coming out in 2 weeks. I'm pumped for it. It's actually 5 days. Holy cow! It's this Friday.
Yeah, we're way closer. What are you talking about?
I'm so pumped for it. So, yeah, it'll be, it's the best place to play some awesome 3D Mario games.
Nice. Chris?
Yeah. The supply shortage doesn't surprise me either. As much as I love patronizing Nintendo, there is a component where it just seems like there's been enough of a trend that supply shortages have kind of underpinned a lot of their product releases. This just seems very much in character when it comes to the physical versions. I opted for a digital one, so it's not something that concerns me. But for those people who are either unable or unwilling to go digital and they really want to get that physical copy, I mean, I just hope that between now and the end of March, they amp up production so that there's enough to meet demand, because it seems like the demand is there. And really, the only real people who win in situations like these are scalpers. And it seems like scalpers have already taken a lot of advantage of that situation. So that's not something I like to see.
Nope.
But hopefully they'll get that under control. But no, I mean, I agree. It's seeing these games come into onto the modern platform is terrific, because not only are they spectacular games, but it's also important. Like, if they want to keep an abundance of Mario fans active and also produce new ones that have the ability to go back to the earlier histories of the franchise, then you need to be able to make these kinds of games available on your modern platforms.
It makes sense.
I love dusting my GameCube off and playing stuff on my GameCube all day long. I've got a not inexpensive HDMI adapter for my GameCube for that very purpose.
Yeah,
but
I just bought both of those things 3 months ago,
right.
something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's great, and it's fun. And so there's very few things that can adequately replicate the experience of playing on original hardware. But if you want the games to stay alive, then you have to put them on your modern systems. And
absolutely,
Mario 64 is right for that. Sunshine is right for that. And I'll be really interested to see how Galaxy ends up playing with a more traditional control setup.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's required to play docked with the two Joy-Cons separately.
I've heard so many competing things about what's actually required from the controls. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's fine either way. Whatever the game requires, I can obviously accommodate just fine. But I mean, even in handheld mode, it'll be weird to play Galaxy.
Yeah, it's gonna be really weird.
Hitting a button to spin instead of shaking the whole Switch, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. But it should be good. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, moving forward. Ubisoft. They haven't made announcements. You guys are in the sphere far more than I am. What stood out on their announcements, and what is your favorite thing that they announced in their most recent thing? Chris or Mike?
Go ahead, Chris.
Mike, why don't you go? No, please.
But I started the Mario thing. I'm really interested to. I mean, let's just get the cat out of the bag. Prince of Persia: Sands of Time is one of my favorite games of all time. So just them remaking it, just them putting it on modern consoles, it's getting like the remake, version, kind of like Resident Evil 2, which Capcom did last year, I believe, and then Resident Evil 3 this year. But I'm super stoked for that. I love that game. It is one of my favorite games of all time. The Prince of Persia series
I feel like you brought that up on the last episode. It's almost like you were debating that they should make it. They hurt you.
The first episode with Cicero, we talked about Sam Fisher, how Ubisoft is just putting Sam Fisher in other games. Splinter Cell, and I argued it's because they want to make Prince of Persia again, and I won that debate. I'm calling you out, Cicero.
It came to realization.
But no, I'm super. But Chris, you probably disagree with me. Jelly, you disagree with me a little bit on this, but I haven't beat Breath of the Wild because I absolutely hate the weapon system. I just hate the weapon system. It's like not one of my favorites at all.
It's not that bad.
Come on. I just want the Master Sword, whatever.
It still kind of breaks, by the way. So just be ready
based
for that
on
one.
stamina.
You have to recharge it.
Like But I'm very excited for Immortals Phoenix Rising that they said coming out December 3rd, because they said that it's in the vein of Breath of the Wild. It's kind of has that like go anywhere type feel to it, kind of like Breath of the Wild did. But they might not have a weapon breaking system, so maybe I'll enjoy this version where I could just explore wherever I want to go and my weapons will be intact the whole time. So I think that's probably one of my favorite announcements as well.
Jumping right into Series S and Series X reveal. Chris, what are your thoughts on them? The prices, the payment plan, the systems in general.
I guess starting in terms of the economics, I think it's a really excellent move on their part. I mean, $500 is obviously, it's a chunk of change. I mean, that's what the One X cost when it launched, and it was too high when that was the price that led the original launch of the Xbox One, the infamous original launch of the Xbox One. Yeah. And it was one of the two terrible price points of the PlayStation 3 when it launched. So, but we also live in different times, and gamers are demanding more from their hardware, and it looks like the Series X is going to try and deliver on a lot of those lofty expectations. The Series S, on the other hand, price point-wise, it's similarly excellent in my estimation, just because a machine with lower specs is going to be lower price, but a lot of the same kinds of features. I mean, it's like, what was it, 200 megahertz less underclocked compared with the Series X CPU, which is pretty impressive. It has the same kind of architecture driving its solid-state drive, even though that drive, half a terabyte is not a lot of space, especially under current circumstances. But it's an entry-level machine, and particularly for people who might have displaced employment because of everything going on right now, who see these upcoming consoles as a serious economic impediment if they want to be able to have something to look forward to on the gaming front, Microsoft is providing options that their competition is not. And I mean, Xbox has generally been where I hang my hat. I think Microsoft in second place it's done wonders for what the Xbox brand tries to do in reaching its audience of gamers. I feel very well treated as an Xbox player, and I'm not sure that primary PlayStation players feel as well treated as I do being an Xbox player. So I really like a lot of these strategies, and I'm probably going to opt for the Series X. I don't know if I'll do it at launch, but it's the one that I'm probably going to try and opt for. And in general, I think they've got a really interesting strategy, especially to govern a console launch. They're trying to do it differently, and I appreciate that.
Mike? Yep. Yeah, no, not even close. It's a solid 720p machine, whereas the Series S is 1440. Upscaled.
Well, also too, like we have the benefit of being primarily Xbox gamers. Every single thing that we play on an Xbox One today can go to one of the new machines, like indiscriminately, save for some of your original Xbox and 360 discs that require original hardware. You still have 4 generations of compatibility with one machine coming up soon. And I mean, maybe I overstate it, but it really kind of bothers me that Sony has had such a cavalier attitude with back compat, really since the first hardware revision of the PS3. And the fact that back compat, even though a fraction of gamers use it, I'm one of them. So I really appreciate the fact that it's there, and I far prefer it to be there than it not be there. And especially now you have Game Pass that can also extend to just as long a period of coverage on the generational front. So I don't understand. It just seems like Xbox just gets a lot of indiscriminate hate for no other reason than they're in second place. And considering the strides that they've made, particularly in the last few years with Phil Spencer in the driver's seat, I don't think it's justified.
I'm about to call a giant audible. Are you guys ready?
Sure.
So we made a plan right beforehand for the third chair listening, and we were going to have test your might right now. We're going to do it, except for you guys both made great arguments for Microsoft right there. I need you to both flip it and defend PlayStation on their upcoming launch. So Sony has just revealed their showcase for Wednesday, and Sony has to compete with Microsoft here. So both of you that just defended Microsoft incredibly well, I'm going to need arguments on PlayStation, what they need to do, and how they can beat Microsoft here.
All right. Okay. Let me bang my head against the table a few times here. And
Chris, let's hear how you are about to prop up PlayStation. Sony, what do they need to do to compete?
They need to keep the economics front and center. Um, there was a stare down between Sony and Microsoft was the one that acted first. So they are in kind of the power position in terms of setting the stage for how people are going to view the investment required to enter the generation. And because of Sony's dominant position so far, the generation settled and Sony won. I think it's pretty plain to see. Microsoft stopped releasing sales statistics for the Xbox One years ago because there was no point of comparison. It's just for whatever reason, and exclusives could be a component of that. I don't know if that's totally the case, but it's certainly a feather in their cap that PlayStation has had more exclusive titles that people want to play, and all things considered and everything that has been seen so far, that is a trend that they plan on continuing. That's their template for continuing domination into the next generation, and it's one that has clearly worked for them. Spider-Man is a hell of an argument to make right out of the gate, especially considering that Xbox is leaning on third-party publications of other games to prop up the necessity for their system. But that's not really an argument for a necessity to have a certain system. You need to have something that defines the platform for the platform's sake, and not just to play the game that you can play on virtually any other machine, but maybe it looks a little bit better. That's not as enticing an argument as it used to be. That's probably what led the 360 to win its generation, but the conversation has shifted, rightfully or wrongfully, to who has the games that justify the purchase of this platform or the buying into the platform and the larger ecosystem. Sony has that position now, and all they really need to do, if they manage to get price under control, is lean into that. I totally agree with Mike where he says they don't really need to do anything. For the most part, I think that that's true, but what they need to do actively is accentuate the strength that they've exhibited for the last 7 years. And, Microsoft's going to get more competitive. They've been buying a bunch of different studios to try and ramp up the production of first-party titles that are Xbox and PC exclusive, but that console-wise you can only play on an Xbox. But they don't have a lot to show for it right now. And a launch sets the tone for the rest of the generation. And if Spider-Man is really the only launch title for the PlayStation 5 that is a must-play right out of the gate, that's still one more title than Microsoft has. And if they can build the launch of the PS5 on Miles Morales' back, then that could be a formula for success on the entire generation, as long as they keep the economics under control. Setting additional purchase options like Microsoft has with Xbox All Access couldn't hurt. I don't know if they're willing to do that, but really, at this point, the economics are the thing that makes it Sony's game to lose. And that makes it their game to lose. That's all I got.
Very, very well argued on behalf of the one that you tore up minutes ago. So I like it from both of you guys. That was very well done, especially because you didn't know I was about to do it. Anyone watching the podcast could see my reaction as they were building it up, and I thought of the idea, and you could see in my face where I thought of the idea. So enjoy the video version. It will be up on YouTube. Moving on though, we talked about it earlier. Tony Hawk Pro Skater. It's been a huge success. It's been a huge success critically. It's been a huge success with consumers. Everyone's loving this remaster of what is an arguably amazing classic game. What do we need to see take the place after this hype wears off and it has moved into the shadows a little bit? What's coming next? Mike kind of took the last one, so Chris, what do we need to see be the next game franchise with that nostalgia reboot?
So there are two ways to approach this question. One is something that appeals massively to gamers of all stripes. There's also, though, the niche audience that might have a particular game from years or even decades past that has never really been followed up, but which glimpsed greatness. And that's my attitude. In 2000, there was a game that came out developed by Raven, now Call of Duty developers, called Star Trek Voyager Elite Force. And it was a first-person shooter that took place in the Star Trek universe. While Star Trek Voyager was on the air, you could actually walk around the USS Voyager. It was under the Unreal 3 engine, so you could interact with all of the principal cast members or all of the principal characters where their voices were provided by the principal cast members. And it told a really interesting story of a military-oriented specialist away team group that you're a part of that gets sent into these crazy, impossible tactical situations that regular Starfleet away teams can't really do. That's what it did on the story front, and it had an awesome multiplayer component to it that was just spectacular. I would like to see a return to that because Star Trek gaming, really the best examples of Star Trek gaming over the last 20 years were Elite Force was one. There were some really good RTS games, but Star Trek hasn't really had a really good, solid video game in almost that long. Bridge Crew for the PSVR and for Oculus and Vive is an excellent game, but it's not massively popular. But I think revisiting a Star Trek FPS, especially considering the upswing that the franchise is on right now, could potentially go pretty far in capturing the public's imagination. It's not going to be as popular as something like a Tony Hawk. How could it be? Star Trek has never been famous for being the cool kid on the block. But in terms of sort of if the entirety of the franchise is going to return to a semblance of greatness, I would prefer that encompass all media, and that includes video games. And I would love to see Star Trek Elite Force 3 if it ever happened.
All right. The Star Trek universe has had some pretty big things lately with Discovery and with Picard. And then before that with the Into Darkness and the Chris Pine series.
Yeah.
So I could see definitely there being a realm where a lot more people are interested in Star Trek than what were originally.
And that 2013 game, I still have nightmares about that.
I know nothing about it, but it sounds like we're going to pretend it didn't exist.
It's fine with me.
Mike, what is your nostalgia reboot? That is highly offensive. Yep.
Oh, uh-huh. Okay. You know, being a comic book fan, I always tend to think in terms of comics, and I guess the thing that immediately comes to mind about a game that begins with NBA, I mean, Thanos' whole motivation was that life didn't have value because it was so plentiful. Do we need another basketball game? I think there's a ton of basketball games out there, and I'll grant you that NBA Street has a little bit more additional character, but I mean, it has maybe a little bit more character than WWE All-Stars did. That doesn't make it not a fun game, but hey, I mean, it's just a stylized NBA game is good for a while, but I don't know if it's necessarily something that is needed. Star Trek in first-person shooter form is something that hasn't really been seen in a really predominant way in nearly 2 decades. And really the primary difference between the Star Trek franchise and the NBA franchise is that one tends to elicit at best anger and at worst apathy, because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of NBA fans anymore comparatively with other sports leagues. And one tries to elicit hope and optimism about the future. And if you can get that while you're shooting aliens in the face, then that's a really interesting and unique combination for my money.
We need a rebuttal on that.
Oh, yes. Actually, I have. I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with that, but if you look at ratings for basketball games in comparison with NFL games or even NHL games or even WNBA games, it doesn't really seem like the league is at the forefront of a lot of dominance in terms of its sports. And yes, people are talking about Michael Jordan, but they're not talking about Michael Jordan for what he's done lately. They're talking about him for what he did 25 years ago. And that can take you reasonably far enough. But still, the fact of the matter is that the market is permeated with sports games. There are sports games that have been turned into annualized franchises, and that usually hasn't gone very well for a lot of sports games. But you don't need to go very far to get your fix when it's related to sports. Granted, you don't really need to go too far when it comes to FPS fixes either, but the thing that specializes it and the thing that makes it more unique and the thing that I would argue makes it more necessary is tying it to a unique exploitation of the franchise in a way that you cannot necessarily get with a more simplistic arcadey kind of NBA game. When you get a first-person shooter that is well constructed, that is well developed, that has really solid art design, that has a mission in the story that it's trying to tell, but that's also fun to just pick up and play with your friends, because while on the sci-fi side you can get the single-player kind of story for that one-on-one kind of aspirational or even sweeping kind of sci-fi epic, at the end of the day, when you sit down with your friends either on a couch or in an Xbox Live party or a PlayStation Network party and you play a first-person shooter, you get the same kind of fun that you get out of a lot of arcade games when you're playing an FPS with your friends. If you throw unique dynamics into that can be accomplished by using phasers instead of 9mm, then that's how an FPS can bring people together. And I would argue that it can do it a little bit more effectively than another sports game can.
Final thoughts.
Well, it's funny enough. Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, the Holomatch, which was its multiplayer component, a group of fan developers got together and has re-released it for its 20th anniversary for free with the permission of CBS, who owns the Star Trek franchise. And so if you want to try it out sometime, you let me know. No. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that if you want the nostalgia trip, you can, but that really great foundation needs to be reborn. And it hasn't been.
All right. For the listeners, we have either The Last Dance or To Boldly Go Where No Man Has Gone Before. You must decide. All right. Yo, jumping forward. Last one of our Test Your Might. Chris, with Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad poised to come out in the next couple years, what DC character or story line do we need to have a video game made of? So which DC hero or villain do we need the story of in game mode?
You know, you're never going to get me to argue against any DC character making it into the interactive medium. I think that they all should, but if I had to prioritize a couple, it's pretty easy for me. Superman is clearly at the top of the list because Superman has not had a dedicated solo video game experience since 2006. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Superman's not the easiest character to create a game around. That's really been one of the major fundamental difficulties that developers have had in creating a video game experience. The last solo Superman game was Superman Returns, based on the film, and they kind of tried to get around the idea of his invulnerability by giving the city of Metropolis a life meter, not Superman. But it wasn't very well... I mean, it was an interesting idea, but it wasn't very well implemented, and the game itself was just kind of repetitive and samey, and it didn't really take things very far. Superman is a character who is, more often than not, primarily defined by the way that he approaches external stimuli. It's the outside world that causes him to react to things, whether it's people that he loves, disasters that take place that he knows that he can avert if necessary, having an enemy that's worthy of him. All of these things lead the immense power of the world's most powerful being, arguably the universe's most powerful being, into action. And if you're going to make a Superman game, it needs to exemplify that. So I've seen people kind of propose like a Telltale style game for Superman, which would probably be really well suited. I would love a third-person Superman action game that puts his power in your hands in a way that that Superman 64 was supposed to, but really didn't do. I actually really like the original Xbox Superman Man of Steel game, but understand how it has a fair amount of shortcomings to it. But really, that's the only game I think of Superman's where you can actually use X-ray vision and look around at things. It murdered the frame rate, but it was a lot of fun to be able to do. So Superman needs justice in video games, and I hope that someone comes along to do that soon. Secondly, the Flash. The Flash, he's a character that should have had a movie 20 years ago. The Flash is a primary DC character that never really gets the kinds of justice that he deserves either. But at the you want to echo, that's fine. It's comics. It's a word that's important to the foundations of the characters. But really, the Flash, like they're yeah,
Justice.
I guess so. He's a little more obsessed than most other people are, but speed is a difficult thing to pull off in a video game, and that's something I understand. So what do? Do you slow things down to allow for the perception, or do you amp things up so much that still keeps the ease of control? Making something on rails even in certain instances. How do you take full advantage of everything that he can do? Because really, at the end of the day, because of his speed, his immense speed, the Flash can be a virtually unstoppable character. But there are 70 years worth of comic stories that give him situations that are worthy of testing his power and his might. And he has an approach to the DC universe and a tenor of stories that in some cases is revolutionary, but also leads to some of the most mind-bogglingly insane visuals I've ever seen in any medium from Flash comics. Having that translated into a video game would be really cool, and I think it's about time that Flash made the jump.
Which Flash are we talking about? The Barry Allen Flash? Kid Flash? Girl Flash?
Barry, to me, is the definitive Flash. That being
Perfect.
said, a lot
That's
of other
the right
people
answer.
my generation tend to view Wally as their definitive Flash, which is totally fine. I mean, I grew up on Wally, but I'd always wanted Barry to come back. And when he finally did in 2008, you found no one happier than this guy. So I would probably argue Barry because his origin story is one of the simplest to relay. With Wally, you really need Barry to explain why Wally is there in the first place. If you have Barry, you don't really need any other explanation. So he's probably the most efficient one to use.
All right, Superman and Flash. Mike, who are you proposing for DC to come out with a game for? Girl power, bro. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Yo, Mike and Chris, I gotta jump out of here. I got an emergency. Can you guys take it from here? Sweet.
Hope everything goes okay.
It's been fun. Everyone listening. Love you guys. I'll catch you later.
Take care, man. It's good to meet you.
You too.
Well, what I said before, I meant it. I'm not going to argue against any DC character making the jump into video games, including Wonder Woman. I think that really any primary Justice League member, including her, can absolutely support their own game. And that includes other members that, aren't always necessarily associated with the lineup, going down to Martian Manhunter or Cyborg or whomever it might be. But DC and licensed games in particular have had success in doing something that it's a little simplistic, but some people call them palette swaps, in the sense where the game mechanics of another series are sort of tailored to a particular license. The one that immediately comes to mind, Green Lantern Rise of the Manhunters, that was made to tie into the 2011 movie, was actually a pretty solid game. It was kind of a God of War clone, but it was with Green Lantern, and it had co-op play. The second player can play as Sinestro, and that was a lot of fun. If you had an Assassin's Creed style game and you swapped Wonder Woman in there, that would be cool. Making the adjustment for her power set might be a little bit on the more inventive side, I would say, especially because, typically speaking, she can fly and she's immensely strong and very few things can actually physically harm her. I don't think that's a reason not to try it. I think Wonder Woman is a character that is absolutely deserving of more love beyond what we've seen in movies, and I would play the heck out of that game. I'll put it that way. It would require more invention. Like you would have to kind of create a genre for him as opposed to just slotting him in. Right. It had its moments. I did a Comics on Consoles episode about Superman Returns. There was a lot of ambition to it, and it is fun in bursts, and they did a pretty good job with the flying mechanics. You could, I think it was the right bumper you could hold down to go into super speed, and if you held it long enough, you could break the sound barrier. It was a totally open world with a huge metropolis. Problem was that metropolis was basically like cardboard and Christmas lights. There was nothing to explore outside of flying around the exteriors of the city, maybe seeing a couple of familiar landmarks like Star Labs or the Daily Planet building. But it was weird. Like, you had to fight dragons in the sky, and it's like, what does that have to do with Superman? Yeah, dragons, ice dragons and fire dragons, and the final boss was a tornado. And Superman, I've read and seen so many Superman stories. A tornado's no match for the guy. All he has to do is really fly to the bottom of it and scoop it up at the top, and he's got it. And yeah, so Well, Rocksteady has a lot of credibility with me. So I was very, very interested about finding out what their next project was. But really, at the end of the day, the reason I read comics and the reason I love comics as much as I do is for heroes. So, just on its face, I'm probably looking forward to Gotham Knights more. The idea of a game set in Gotham City without Batman. I mean, Batman is one of my all-time favorite fictional characters, so it's not optimal, but I love every one of the characters that you get to play as for very different reasons. You know, it's the Tim Drake Robin that we're gonna have. It's Jason Todd as the Red Hood. It's Nightwing and it's Batgirl. Those are four excellent characters in their own right. They all tell very different stories about the different components that Batman has brought out in each of them. You know, I mean, Nightwing is kind of like the far more well-adjusted heroic leader that you get. You know, Dick Grayson has the ability to lead people and to inspire people, but to also have the effectiveness that he learned from his mentor. Jason Todd, as the second Robin, is someone who was very, very badly wronged. And so the immense training that he got from one of the most capable people in the world was taken in a whole other direction. And for a while, he basically became Batman's biggest failure, come back to haunt him. And I thought Arkham Knight did a really good job of exemplifying that. Tim Drake is in... Oh, sorry. 5 years, I figured, is long enough on the statute of limitations, but maybe not for some people. Sure. Yeah, of course. It's hard to keep a lid on it for 5. Sorry if I spoiled it for someone. But Tim Drake, in a lot of ways, is destined to be just as good or maybe even a better detective than Bruce Wayne was. And he owes that to the lineage of the training that Batman provided for him. And Barbara Gordon has the pragmatism of her father coupled with the capability of Batman while also exploiting her own very unique gifts that she had as Oracle and as Batgirl. Every single one of the characters that we're going to play as in Gotham Knights shows a different facet and a different strength that they all derived from Batman himself. So that's the one I'm probably looking forward to more, but that's not to take away from Rocksteady's skill in creating video games. I love Rocksteady, and I'm really looking forward to what they have coming down to. Hey, yeah, sure. There is certainly plenty of material to draw from to make a compelling Suicide Squad story. I mean, the thing that really tends to invest people in the Suicide Squad when I was selling comics and had to make the case for someone who was interested in Suicide Squad picking the book up was that, look, these are all people who are united by the fact that they have a debt to pay to society, but sometimes, that might not necessarily be justified in some cases. Not everyone in the Suicide Squad is a villain per se, but they are all drawn to try and do something with the skills that they have that can be perceived as something good. And that can be enough for telling a good story. The characters that they have lined up are a little bit more blatantly evil, though. And I think the situation that they find themselves in with telling a story is that they are confronted with a situation in which the real authority of justice and good has been subverted. And I mean, you saw Brainiac's skull ship, and Superman didn't look well. So if it falls on the authorities to corral the Suicide Squad into providing a bit of salvation for the people of Metropolis, if they have to try and shield themselves from heat vision from Superman, then that might be interesting enough, at least as a baseline. But it's really up to the storytellers to go a little bit deeper with the characters themselves to make us care beyond the fact that, hey, look, Deadshot's got a jetpack now. That's interesting. So we'll see. I mean, really, at the end of the day, I would probably say Assassin's Creed 1. Just because, even though I played part of 2, and I haven't played the majority of the series, but that became such an important foundation for what Ubisoft would do and what they would ultimately become as a major game publisher. It's really hard to discount that game's foundation in what the publisher would ultimately become. But I mean, at the same time too, I really liked Mario and Rabbids. I don't know if I would necessarily put that as an all-timer, but I thought that was a really interesting exploitation of two very different franchises combining into a very interesting whole. So yeah. Yeah. I like the Rayman games. Just as far as solid platformers are concerned, I generally have a lot of fun with that. It's hard to say whether or not any of the Rayman games are all timers, but similarly important in terms of the overall makeup of what we understand to be Ubisoft's own unique identity. So I have a lot of fun with what was the Rayman Legends, I think, was the one that hit the Wii U, and it was originally going to be a Wii U exclusive, I think, before they pushed it to other platforms, and that was terrific. I had a lot of fun with that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. You know, Red Steel 2 I think was a Ubisoft game as well. And I mean, first one was okay, but that second one they really got like anyone who bought a Wii and was like a Star Wars fan immediately saw the potential, right? With the controller. That is a lightsaber hilt or it's a sword handle. And Red Steel 2, even more than the lightsaber game that eventually came out, got the sword play just right. And it's been a long time since I played it, but it always stuck with me as just a solid game. Oh, okay. Sure, yes. You can find me on Twitter at Chris Clow, ChrisClow, and my shows are all on Twitter too, at Comics Consoles, at Binge Comic, and at DSC Debrief, along with my good friend Cicero Holmes on the Star Trek side. It's been a while since we've recorded another episode, but Star Trek just started its new animated series, and we're hopefully going to get in the groove and recap some of those episodes soon, maybe once my move is in the rearview mirror. Um, but it's always fun to get together with the debrief crew to talk new Star Trek. So that's a lot of fun, and I'm also going to be working on a Comics on Consoles backup feature episode about Iron Man VR and also about the Avengers. So that's also a couple of other things to look forward to if you are inclined, of course. No, thank you, man. Much appreciated. My ego is bruised, but it will recover. Take care. Thanks.